while we started working on this issue, it was almost 2 years ago, and Hamon and I were working at the same department. I was his dean, actually. So while we were discussing about terrorism, political violence, and also the women issues in it, actually, in parentheses, Hamon has been working on women's role in the jihadist organizations for a long time. And so while we were discussing about that, we decided to work on this issue more, because motherhood is a very specific phenomena, and in Turkey there are different samples of mothers who are very proactive in political issues, starting from the 1980s. After the military coup, thousands of people were disappeared, and their mothers are still doing protests every Saturday, and they are called Saturday Mothers, at the center of Istanbul, at Taksim. Sometimes, according to the governmental positions, sometimes the governments are very much harsh against them, sometimes they are tolerant, but the mothers are there. And now we are facing with a new pattern with mother activism. It was the waiting mothers issue. They started a sit-in protest in Diyarbakir. They are the mothers of PKK militants, and although it emerged naturally at the beginning, then nowadays it's becoming a governmental controlled issue. But the children, some of the children are back, and they are continuing with their protests. So when it comes to motherhood issue, since that we're dealing with complex issues, complex challenges in our daily lives, in the political life too, we need to create complex measures to confront all these challenges. And the traditional measures, military measures, political measures, are not enough to deal with these issues. There are newly emerged security issues, and we need new instruments. So since that I've been working with John and Professor Vamuk Hoca for many years, I'm also dealing with this political psychology side of it. We need some psychopolitical instruments that we can use against these kind of security challenges. 2 or 3 days ago, there was news on the TV channel. It was very interesting, actually. There was a drug dealer arrested by the police. The police arrested him in his house, and he was lying on the ground. He was handcuffed, and he was very arrogant against the police, and saying that he has very strong relations with the government. He's going to show them what he can do. The police was very kind, actually. Then suddenly his mother came into the room, and the mother was crying and shouting, "Did you see what you have done? Was it the thing that we have dreamed while you were a baby? What is this profile that I am seeing now?" And she was crying, and the drug dealer suddenly started crying and, "Take my mom away, take my mom away, I don't want to see my mom." And he was like a baby. The arrogant people was changed into a kid, and asking or begging for the police to leave him alone and take his mother away. So I think there are lots of different cultures, but motherhood role is something very important, very specific in our lives. So in order to add some new instruments for peacemaking, peace building, all kinds of peace issues, and then I think we need to put the motherhood identity to the center. Now we prepared a book about that when we asked for papers. There were lots of papers coming from all around the world. There were mothers and there were academics who are working on motherhood. And now Hamon is going to present the book and the articles in that book. Thank you, Hamon.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Well, good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for the introduction. Just following up at what Dennis was talking about. As we all know, motherhood can be quite a very personal kind of an experience as well. And that is very much reflected in the chapters that we have here, from the preference, I mean, from the first chapter that Lord John actually was kind enough to contribute, we see that element of personality and personification of the experiences there. And that was something that we were very much appreciating. So in all the chapters that you see, despite the geography that they come from, despite the story that they are talking about, and despite the academic value that they carry, there is some element of personality, and there's some element of personal reactions, personal connection that makes this book a bit different from the other books that you see, I mean, in this field. So I'm not going to take much of your time on that. So beside what Dennis was talking about as the personal motive for making this book, there were, of course, some academic background to that as well. So this book was very much was inspired by the power of mothers that wanted to speak out against violent groups in different geographies. And we found out that, of course, I mean, although the bottom line of many of these activities might be the same, but depending on the geography, depending on the context, depending on where these people come from, some of the mechanisms, some of the actions and behavior might be different, and it could be actually stand as something unique which can help and which can develop to some other issues that can help other parts of the world. We tried our best actually to bring quite a number of case studies from all around the world. We tried to have it as wide as possible, as global as possible, and we were quite fortunate to have quite a number of nice people. And it's very interesting that this, I mean, apart from me and Lord John, the rest of the authors, the rest of the contributors are all female, and majority of them are coming from the background of motherhood. They have actually experienced that. So when they reflect those motherhood, or when they reflect their personal experience in the field that they do, I mean, you can figure out, and you can actually come up with very, very interesting kind of chapters there. So one thing that we wanted to very much voice up in this volume was the whole concept of maternal agency. So in that sense, the terminology very much came from the Linda Hall's work. We were very close to have her also to contribute to the book, but she said that it is for, I don't know, decades that I'm working on this issue. I want to get a break, so you guys go ahead with that. We said, okay, we appreciate that. But she was very, very kind, and she was very supportive. So the whole idea was based on maternal agency. And in that sense, it's defined as female agency in political violence, which is very much communicated and negotiated through motherhood. So that is exactly the bottom line of the book. So how motherhood and how agency in terms of political violence or going against that is very much negotiated by motherhood. So based on that, we are actually showing the visualization of this statement in different case studies in different geographies around the world. How motherhood is negotiating actually with the rather against or pro-political violence in some cases. So the maternal agency creates this array of conflicting opportunities. That is something that has been clearly mentioned and addressed in almost all the chapters that we have. So it actually comes around different concepts such as gender, violence, security, but the most important thing is that maternal agency creates the possibility for activism against war and violence, and at the same time mobilization for war and violence. That is something that has been also addressed here, because for the work that I was doing previously, I was looking at how maternal agency is in service of promoting and mobilizing war and violence. I was looking at the gender structure of jihadi organizations such as ISIS based on my fieldwork in Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, and southern part of Turkey. And in those places, I was actually looking at how womanhood, motherhood, and what we call in general maternal agency was in charge or in service of promoting war and violence. But here, the focus, while we were recognizing the mobilization, it was on how it is countering that in different contexts. So the chapters in this book were carefully gathered to address these three following concepts. One was maternal agency does not readily translate to politics of peace. That is something that it was very important, and it was noticed in almost all the chapters that we had. There are difficulties. It is not an easy, straightforward kind of a approach that, yes, we have some mothers there and therefore everything would be peaceful. No, it is much more complicated than that. And that is going back to what we were discussing a bit earlier about how maternal agency negotiates and finds its way, struggles to come up with what is called peace. At the same time, maternal subjectivity creates the discursive potential for some mothers to exercise a degree of agency and be taken seriously by state, international institutions, families, and etc. So that is another thing that we wanted to demonstrate throughout the chapters that we have. And thirdly, women are not equally granted a degree of agency and protection. The examples that we have, the cases that we have, shows that depending again on the geography, culture, context in general, the degree and the degree of success perhaps varies. It is not really always a desirable kind of a outcome that we are expecting, but it is in a way paving a way for some kind of a negotiation or some kind of a change in the atmosphere of the conflict that we have. So this book therefore gives a nuanced view of female agency in political violence. That is what we are hoping actually, by reviewing and analyzing the political construction of motherhood in those contexts that we were talking about and have been mentioned in the book as a form of social agency against political violence committed by both state and non-state actors. It is another forte for this book, I can say. The cases that have been chosen, the arguments that have been presented in this book are not only about motherhood against the atrocity of the government, but also non-government organizations as well. So this is very much reflected in the cases. So we have a wide variety of cases there that it shows how women, how motherhood, how maternal agency is working in case of fighting or going against political violence committed by both state and non-state actors. So just going very quickly, just to pay respect to those who have actually kindly contributed to this book. Well, of course, Lord John Elder-Rice was one of the people that we are very much grateful to his contribution to this book. A very, very interesting chapter, I have to say. I was very much pleased to read that. It was such a joy reading that chapter, not because we are invited here by you, but it's a very interesting, I was following your work before, and the way that you write is quite engaging. And here, because it's becoming more personal as well, that personal experience really helps people to have a good grasp of what is going to happen, what is coming up in that book. We were also very fortunate to have Lucy Hall from University of Amsterdam, who wrote a very, very interesting, and I really recommend people to have a look at this chapter at least. This is the laying the foundation, the academic and also the academic foundation of the book. But one thing that makes this chapter very interesting is how skillfully she is actually mixing her personal experience as a mother with the literature and with the debates that we have in literature when it comes to the matter of maternal agency against political violence. So that was a very good book, a very good chapter. On the other hand, we have Candice that was talking about mothers and the experiences of mothers of terrorists, mothers of those who have rather been a part or supporter of Islamist terrorist organizations in the United States and are present there. So she's talking about how these mothers are dealing with the issue of motherhood against political violence. Their kids are in custody in United States prisons, and this is a very, very engaging field work that she has done about how these women, how these mothers are engaged and the connection that they make with their kids in prison. Crystal was talking about giving mothers who nurture sustainable peace and women's political agency in Argentina. Argentina, as you know, is one of those countries that have been very famous about that maternal agency. We have since 70s that the country was under the military dictatorship. We have mothers playing a very, very important role in fighting against political violence. So she's actually looking at it from a very, very interesting and I have to say quite a unique way of approaching that. That makes this chapter quite different from whatever chapters which have been written about this case. And also we have the case of India. India is one of those places in the world that, for those of you who are aware of that, are very, very strong when it comes to communal activities, communal practices. And she, in her book, is talking about how some mothers in northeastern part of India, in conflict zones that we have some separatist groups working there, deal with this issue of living in conflict zone and the dichotomy that they have about their identity of being an Indian and at the same time belonging to a conflict zone that is searching for independence. So also we have a very interesting case study closer to the UK, of course a part of UK, and it's about the Northern Ireland. So in their chapter, Fidelma and Christina, they were looking at the motivation of women who were present because of the Northern Ireland conflict. So she's actually looking at how these women in prison react throughout the before prison, while they are in prison, and after that. So it's a very, very interesting change of character, change of identity, change of ideology that you can see in them. And she's actually talking about how these people from being a supporter and being in prison turn into rather people with a stronger idea about this matter when they come out, or some people who are actually thinking that we need to re-examine what we were before. I'm going quickly on that. Another one which was very interesting was about the case of motherhood in Iraq by Yasmin. She is actually from the British University in Cairo, but she has done a very, very intensive field work in Iraq. So she was presenting this book about how she was talking about the connection between the matrix of domination and matrix of agency. She was looking at the case of mothers in Iraq, of those whom their kids were captured or killed during the anti-terrorism activities in Iraq. So she's talking about how the culture, how the religion, how the traditions making a very, very big obstacle against motherhood activity, and how these women, how these mothers actually overcoming those activities or those challenges. We have also a case for the Palestinian territory in the West Bank where Lily and Fadwa, both of them are quite well-known activists in the Palestinian territory. They were talking about the experience of motherhood there in the so-called the occupied Palestinian territories back there. We really wanted to have a case from Israel too. But unfortunately, the colleagues were quite busy. I contacted a few of them, but unfortunately, the timeline of the book didn't really match that. We had that in mind to make a balanced kind of a representation in that matter, but unfortunately, because of the timeline and because of at least the people that we have contacted, they were quite busy in that sense. Hopefully, we will be having the chance to reflect what they think in some other cases. I know that I'm running out of time. I'm going just very quick through the last three ones. We have also a case from Bosnia and Herzegovina where Jasmina was talking about mothers of Srebrenica and how the shadow of the genocide in the 90s in Balkan is still very much hanging around those people, and how motherhood, after all these years, after 2 decades, is very much involved and very much engaged with this whole idea of justifying things that has happened there, or to make a reconciliation within the society of what happened before. Also closer to to Bosnia, we had the case from North Macedonia, where Elena was talking about the construction of motherhood in places like that, where the state has been dismantled, a state has been dismantled, new identities, new national identities have been made, violence have been a part of that new identity creation, and how women actually reacted, and how mothers actually reacted to that new construction of identity. And at last, we were together with Deniz, we presented a chapter that she was actually explaining about mothers of Kurdistan's Workers' Party, PKK, and how these women are actually. The case of PKK was very interesting because we are talking about a kind of a conflict of identity. From one side, women are very much considered as the defender of the Kurdish identity, because they are the one that give birth to the next generation of fighters, and these are the one that the first initial years of bringing up happens. Mothers are the one in charge of them in that traditional society. So Kurdish women are considered as the guardian of that Kurdishness. But at the same time, these mothers are starting to revolt against that idea that Kurdishness is to be connected to PKK, or Kurdishness means that we have to go against the national identity of Turkey, and therefore we have to have our own national identity. So the conflict that we have there, and how these people actually trying to keep that Kurdishness in a way, or redefine that Kurdishness in a way, and on the other hand, trying to get closer to the national argument or national narrative of nationalism and national identity in Turkey. So we are talking about how these grassroots mothers trying to change things and to make a reconciliation between these two identity